Hello and welcome to Talking Points. I'm Wokeg and this is...
Callum.
And today we are going to be discussing Shadows of Mordor.
Excellent. So, the story. I hear you thought it was very bare bones.
Are we just going to be reading from our notes now? Well, I think they're stretching the Tolkien lore to the limits.
Tolkien!
Tolkien!
Oh, dear. Okay, so, yes, you thought they were stretching the lore to its limits. Would you say that you thought they were even breaking it in places?
I personally didn't mind it too much up until the very end, where it dives into the... You could say it's bad fan fiction.
Oh, god damn it, we suck at this. Oh, I sincerely hope you're going to cut this out.
This is... Me? I thought you were editing this.
Oh, am I? Oh, I hope I'm going to cut this out then. Otherwise we'll be that annoying sort of podcast thing that has 5 minutes of two people laughing at each other at the very start for no other reason than that they're doing a podcast.
Was that a jab at my podcast?
No, that's a jab at every podcast.
Because I could go, you know. You
could.
You could do this on your own if you want.
I can, I've got your notes.
Just you and a sock puppet.
Totally. I would even animate it like that. It'll be a little cartoon me and a little cartoon sock puppet. Sock puppet. Sock puppet. I will call him Tolkien. Oh dear. Yeah, so the story. So what's your rationale on thinking that it's bare bones? Because I would not say I necessarily agree with that.
I think it's just a case of like there's no real characters developed outside of Talion and Elf Guy, Celebrimbor.
Elf Guy.
He's Elf Guy. Like I can sort of understand that it's trying to focus more on like the Talion's personal mission and everything, but it's not really in a sense of missions aren't really story driven, they're action driven with a very few exceptions.
This is quite true, but then I would say that sort of argues against your point. It's not really about Talion, and there is quite a lot of character development. Sauron, in particular, gets a load. He's one of these characters who's always built up as the master of lies and deceit. And in this, he actually gets a little bit of, well, this is how he's going around tricking people, not just fait accompli. Look at all these people he's lied to and they've swallowed it. As well, I mean, I've got a whole section here on... Okay, sorry, I'm just going to read the first word to you of every one of my character things. So, Talion, notes, disagree. Talion's family, dead woman and oh no, that's in the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got that.
Celebrimbor, disagree. Sauron, confusion. Hergon, 2 major issues. Paragraph, also he has some other interesting issues. Ratbag is glorious.
Hey, now, you were the one who was also agreeing with me the other day on that.
What, on Hergon?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hergon...
Have you had a change of heart?
No, I haven't. He still sucks, you're right. He's bland, no one cares about him, and he's actively annoying. I do have a line here written, no character has ever been decent who was introduced with the line, so you didn't die 10 years ago. That never works for anyone, ever.
I completely forgot his name throughout most of the game, so I started calling him Ginger Talion.
It kind of works though, doesn't it?
Yeah, kind of does.
I don't know if that might be a subtle nod or whatever. In the Lord of the Rings strategy battle game made by Games Workshop, Tarnost, which is where Hergon is from, is just blanket Scotland. It's literally just men in kilts with axes. So that could be a sort of, yeah. Right, so what other points do I have here? So, first major issue, his voice actor sound...
But then why was the dwarf guy Scottish?
Right, okay.
Why was the dwarf guy Scottish, but Hergon was not? Alright, we'll get on to the dwarf guy later then.
Well, the dwarf guy, I mean, dwarves in Tolkien are, or at least in the movies,
what is his name? What is his name?
Oh, his name is... Oh, bugger, hold on a second. I've got it written down here, because you didn't even write a note. You actually just wrote dwarf guy. Torvin, there we go. His name's Torvin.
Torvin, there we go, right.
Yeah. I actually really didn't like him. I thought he was a bit of a jerk. I felt he and a couple of other levels from the levels and concepts from the second map ran into this issue where it seemed like they'd come from a much earlier phase in development to the rest of the game. So
yeah, it felt like they were retreading ground.
In particular, that stealth mission. Yeah, totally. And he's like, teaching you how to hunt. We've been hunting orc captains. That's the entire premise of the game. We had to do literally an entire map to get this far.
This is my problem with it. I felt like I could have liked Torvin a lot better, but because he was so tied in with such terrible missions, I kind of hated him by proxy. But by himself, I thought he was an alright character, but his missions I just dreaded.
I thought he had some poor lines, and I would have liked to see Talion getting a little bit more irate with him. I found Talion as a character was mostly bland and uninteresting, but he actually has a lot of decent moments. When he's reacting off of other people. There's this actual sense of emotion and energy to him. He actually almost comes close to being a memorable character, despite all the odds, because he's, I mean, what was it you described him as? He's a bland vengeance character. That's all he does. He's after vengeance for his family. In many ways, he's actually not, because he's not after vengeance for his family. Celebrimbor tells him, doesn't he, I think? Celebrimbor tells him that the only way to remove the curse is to kill the Black Hand. Talion, especially at the start of the game, only wants to die and stay dead and be with his family.
I suppose.
I mean, it's only the very end of the game where he actually goes in for vengeance. And at the end of the game, which we also massively disagree on, I would like to add. We can get to that.
Alright, okay then.
God, we need structure, because we are leaping all over the place here. God, you know, I'm going through here. The only thing I have that's actually quite short is under the notes you have for the hammer. It says, totally agree. Apart from that, everything else is paragraph, paragraph, paragraph.
Well, I'm glad you got into it.
Well, I mean, after that ending, you can't not have emotions running high, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt so incredibly annoyed with it that they give us... I mean, one, the ending sequence as a whole went steadily downhill after you confront your nemesis. I was a little bit impressed with the nemesis finding algorithms as was, because I didn't actually have a nemesis. I played my game very poorly. I didn't really allow one to develop, so I didn't get a lot of the interesting aspects of that side of things as we were going through it, as I was going through it rather. But it still managed to pick the orc who had caused me the most grief, who I'd spent the most time fighting, who wasn't my official nemesis, and who'd already died a couple of times, albeit not to the head chop off stage, but who was tied, and I think in one case beaten, for power level by several other orcs, so it still picked who should have been my nemesis, even though I didn't actually have an official one. So I was quite impressed with that, and obviously the whole system. Do we need to talk about it? I mean, it's received so much praise, I think.
Yeah, of course we have to talk about it.
Well,
like,
okay.
Just because other people have talked about it does not mean that it's probably the best feature of the game, or even the most noteworthy feature of the game. So I think it would be odd
to have a disagreement note on that.
Oh, okay then. Okay.
Okay, right, so yeah, here, under Nemesis System, it says that you have written that you think it is the best part of the game, and I have written, I disagree.
Of course you would.
Well, I don't automatically disagree. It's not my default position. I never just say I will take the contrary stance. I legitimately have a differing opinion.
Okay, cool.
I felt that the Nemesis system and the captaincy system in general was great. It was a really engaging, dynamic gameplay mechanic, and actually dynamic as well. I mean, how that must have looked in interviews, it would just have seemed like every other promise of a dramatic... I mean, do you remember when, before Skyrim came out, and the things Bethesda said about the Radiant questing system? If you drop a sword in
They were saying that about Oblivion. They were saying that about Oblivion,
Jesus
and
Christ.
it didn't work. And then when Skyrim was about to come out, they said it again. Honestly, guys, we got it down this time.
But that's exactly my point. Companies always say these things to the point that no one...
So wait until the next game comes out. Oh yeah, you'll be able to do it this time.
The thing there, though, is that no one goes to test for that. You go to test for the huge, structured, arcing quests. You don't go to test for the dynamic ones. I mean, you want your huge, tailor-made experience. That's half the... Before this heads in the direction of bitching about that which shall not be named... What the hell was I saying?
We should totally do a test episode of this. I don't know why, it seemed like a very obvious one to do, and yeah, I don't think I've put it down.
Well, I suppose the issue would be, what would we talk about? You'd need to do different sub-episodes.
Oh, definitely, but we'll come to that later.
Talking Points miniseries, The Elder Scrolls.
Sure, we'll think of things. But yeah, Shadow of Mordor, what did you...
Yes, Shadow of Mordor, back to that. I know we did have a line of inquiry before this, but I've completely forgotten what it was, apart from the fact that it was related to the Nemesis system. Oh yeah, so no one took it seriously in the run-up, because it sounded like one of those where the company says something, and even if the game is ultimately going to be good, or even very good, you know it's just hyperbole, but they actually weren't bullshitting, and people have been, lying, but PR lying.
I was really surprised.
I think everyone was. As I say, just the fact that they said they had this system, it sounded like every other piece of hyperbole that we'd ever heard from gaming PR, and then it came out as like, oh, this is actually more or less what they promised.
Yeah.
My god. Yeah. Anyway, so, excellent system, promoted a lot of good things, but for me, I thought it was tied in first place with the world building as a feature of the game. Now, to me, it seemed like this was how a company should treat its IP, especially something as well-respected and well-loved as Lord of the Rings. It has a few major fuck-ups. What do I have? There's got a couple of notes on that. The big one being, minor one being, but Gollum was not a hobbit. Gollum was never a hobbit. Gollum was one of a weird freak race of non-hobbits that were essentially hobbits, but he's not a hobbit. You don't get away with saying that. That's just...
Wait, really?
Yeah, no, him and what's his face, other guy. They're described as Hobbit-like.
All right. I suppose they were described as hobbits in the film, so
You know, I don't think they are, actually.
they wanted to carry that over. They were. I watched them recently. Galadriel's all like, and then the ring came into possession of a hobbit.
No, I'm pretty sure that's Bilbo.
No, it was Gollum. I watched them like a week ago, but
Yeah, what was I saying? So, the world building, few huge fuck-ups, and the other big one being the bit at the end with the black hand.
what did the black... Sorry, I was kind of confused. Right, so from what I gathered, the black hand... Because at the beginning he used Talion to summon Celebrimbor. And then at the end, what I gathered was he did the same sort of ritual thing on himself to summon the spirit of Sauron. I think.
Not quite. So, the best that I've been able to get is that... So, you remember the scene where Celebrimbor is all like, oh, he's either succumbed or been dominated or what have you to or by Sauron, and he's helping perfect the One Ring.
Yeah.
So, when the ring flashes blue, you're aware that the power gimmick the ring has is it's got the majority of Sauron's will and power and malice in it, yeah?
Yeah.
So I think what was that was supposed to be is that Celebrimbor tainting the One Ring in the same way that Sauron had tainted all the other rings that he'd helped forge. So it's actually, as an in-universe thing, as far as I understand it, it's completely the opposite to the way Tolkien seems to have written about Celebrimbor, but it's actually plausible, fairly so. It's not that much of a stretch. God, I completely forgot what it was good. Oh, yeah, but the stretch then comes is that that's not him summoning Sauron into his body, because obviously why would he not just do that any time he wanted to?
Yeah.
That's him summoning Celebrimbor into his body. So he's replicated the circumstances of Celebrimbor's murder, and that somehow summoned him into Talion, and then he's somehow able to kill himself, and that takes Celebrimbor from Talion into him. I don't know quite how that's supposed to work, but you know, that's honestly the least important weak link.
Well then, why does he turn into Sauron?
Well, because, as far as I can ascertain, is that... So, I think Celebrimbor is acting as sort of Wi-Fi for the ring.
What?
Right, so...
Sure.
The only way Sauron is able to take physical form...
I hope this makes it into the episode. Celebrimbor is Wi-Fi for the ring.
Basically, see, like, that's the only way I can make sense of it. So, Sauron is only able to take physical form again once he has the ring in his possession, because he doesn't have enough power on his own otherwise. Even the whole thing about the eye, in the books, it's never made explicitly clear whether that eye is a literal thing, or a metaphorical thing, or if sometimes it's one and sometimes it's the other, and, you know, no one really knows. What the hell was I saying? God, I keep losing track of things.
That's not good.
Celebrimbor's Wi-Fi. Right, have you watched any of my episodes? I've counted. Some of these things, I take 4 or 5 minutes to get to the end of a sentence and then forget what the beginning of it was. You'd say what you like about the pauses inside her, but at least you remember what you're talking about after the gaps.
Oh, I suppose.
Jesus Christ. Right, so, Celebrimbor putting some of his will into the ring. So the idea is, rather than accessing the ring directly, he's able to access the ring through Celebrimbor. The thing that supports this, then, is Celebrimbor's ability to brand and dominate creatures. Now, as far as we're aware, in-universe, he gains that ability after stealing the One Ring. The ring itself is made up of Sauron's ability to dominate and Sauron's will, which is mostly made up of the desire to dominate things.
Yeah.
So, that actually makes a modicum of sense, because in order for him to be able to use that power without the ring, he'd need to either have some kind of fraction of the ring's power in him, or some kind of link to its power to begin with. So, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. I just don't think they certainly didn't make that very clear at all in game.
No, it's not clear. It's kind of potentially implied. We're gonna have to wait for the DLC and or the sequel.
I'm actually quite looking forward to the DLC. I never thought it's kind of the first DLC in a while that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be pretty decent. There is the issue that was not a final boss fight.
Not in any shred of the word.
Yeah, just, I mean, quick time events. Quick time events, for fuck's sakes. They've done so well all game, and then... And the issue for me, one of the issues for me as well, was that, as you're aware, I play left-handed. they don't change the icons over once you've remapped the mouse keys.
Oh, really?
All game, I was getting the wrong prompts, but seemingly at random intervals, so sometimes it would tell me to press the left mouse key and it would mean press the right key, and sometimes it would mean press the left key. Similarly, on the tutorializing front, I didn't figure out how to brutalize for 5 hours after I got the ability, because it never made it clear that I needed to double tap. I just kept walking up to people, getting my bow and arrow out when I meant to brutally shank them, and gently prodding them in the back until they gently prod them in the back until they turned round.
See, I play with a controller. Like, the controller mappings were brilliant, I thought. I didn't even try it with keyboard and mouse, because usually, like, third-person action games I always find to be better with a controller.
I've never been able to play with controllers.
Fair enough.
Not really so keen on them. What is this image thing that is being sent
It's
to me?
basically the same image I put in the Dropbox, but you can't see that, so I sent you this one. It's Talion's...
Oh, God.
Because they released a new photo mode. A new photo mode for the game. And it's very clear that you're not meant to look at Talion's expressions from up close. They look alright from far away because it's exaggerated, but up close it's terrifying.
I feel a little bit ill, actually. Like, not a massive amount, but slightly sick.
Yep.
Jesus.
Yep.
Oh, Christ. Yeah, no, that's not so good.
Photo modes are really fun, by the way.
I can imagine, but, with it crashing as much as it does on mine.
Oh, yeah.
I did find it's quite rare that I will play a game that crashes so heavily and actually want to keep playing.
I'm wondering, what's your video card? Is it Nvidia?
Nope.
Or is it AMD?
It's AMD, yeah. It's, as far as I can tell, it's mostly been Nvidia people having the problems, which has also not really helped because it's meant that mostly Nvidia fixes are being suggested.
Yeah, because that's what I've seen about it.
I think it's just that it's a new game, it's very high spec, a lot of older hardware and software doesn't seem to want to take it very well. That's fine, I can live with that, it's just come out. Teething problems. I'm sure if I was playing it a year from now and if I just started, I wouldn't be having these issues.
Yeah, I didn't have a single bug in my game.
Well, yeah, there you go. So it's clearly variable. It's
good to point out that there are certainly issues with it.
But the devs are working on fixing them. There's not been sort of alarming silence or anything, so we're looking okay there.
Yeah, that's alright. Overall, it's a quite decent port, actually.
Yeah, no complaint. Well, okay, I say no complaints here. The mouse button prompting would be nice. To be clear, it wasn't that I manually changed them around in game. It's that my mouse is always set on left-handed, so it didn't detect that, and as a result,
do most other games detect that?
Yeah, usually.
All right.
Or they don't give you mouse click prompts. It's not usually a problem. Yeah, so the issue is that the final action in the game is you need to rapidly click one mouse button.
You clicked the wrong one.
Which is a whole heap of bullshit. I clicked the wrong one 5 times because I kept getting confused. Now, on the one hand, that's partially me being simple-minded. On the other hand, I was already frustrated and pissed off at being given a bullshit cutscene sequence. And at the time, I was convinced it was the literal manifestation of Sauron. I was thinking, 1, where the fuck did he get his armor from? He should just be possessed. 2, the fuck is this? He's not supposed to be able to take physical form. This is a major point. That's like half the War of the Ring. In fact, the entirety of the War of the Ring is over getting Sauron a body back so he can wander around and kick ass, because most of the people who could beat him before are dead.
Yeah.
I have accepted since that there is quite a high chance that was meant to be metaphorical in some way, but if it was, they need to show that it was in the DLC somehow, or give reference to that, because just, ugh.
Yeah. I was kind of disappointed with the Nemesis encounter. I thought was done very well, but my war chiefs were incredibly powerful because I was expecting a much more difficult fight, so I improved their stats. So they just rolled over the Nemesis and the 5 Talons. It was just sort of okay, well, I'll just stand back then.
Yeah, I had the exact opposite situation, but the same outcome. So what happened with me was, because I knew we were filming this today, I had to sort of power through the last couple of levels, which didn't ruin the game for me. The only thing that I really would have done different is maybe take a couple of extra days out and actually raise some war chiefs myself rather than just converting the guys who were there.
Yeah.
But the point is, I just had random war chiefs, and most of the really strong ones had no fear, so I'd had to kill them to get through.
Mm-hmm.
So mine were mostly fairly weak. I think 1 or 2 guys in there who could actually do a bit of damage, but they weren't great by any means. In the fight with the Nemesis, I actually had a pretty tense time because I don't know if they bugged out or if just their attack AI didn't trigger automatically, but they stood back until I was halfway through killing all the mooks around him, so I didn't notice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that they weren't there. And I was like, oh shit, activate them. But after they came in, they basically cleaned up and then lynched my nemesis for me, which was a little bit anticlimactic, because my guy, he was the one who I described to you the other day, so he was immune to everything except explosions and had hatred of burns. The only thing he didn't have going for him was he couldn't regen, but yeah. Oh, and he didn't have summoner, I suppose. But I was thinking, how the fuck am I supposed to beat this guy? This is a wide open plain, unless I lure him into that castle over there, and then that kind of took away from it, because that fight was taken away from me. My guys just moved in, kicked him to the floor, and then poisoned him to death, which is an attack the player can't get, so it kind of felt like he was defeated by something he wasn't supposed to ever face. As it was, he was sort of a perfect counter for me, but not for them. It was kind of like, well, you know, like a duel, but you're... your sidekicks show up with their submachine guns, and just as you're starting to get your ass handed to you and actually having to work for it, they open up. It's like, well, okay, that's great, but I didn't really win the duel, did I? You just murdered the guy I was fighting. There's a slight difference. And then with the Talons, they give you information on them right at the start of the game, and then don't mention them at all. So I thought there was going to be some big reveal. I'd maybe have to fight my way through one at a time. They'd be a horrible force to fight.
I honestly thought that that was something else that got cut.
Oh, what?
Because they do give you that information right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, these are the big bad nemesis guys. You can't quite kill them because their power will increase or whatever it says.
Yeah, and does it actually say that?
It says like if you kill one, their soul will go into another orc, but with their experience, which I thought would be a kind of cool twist on the way that how you dying impacts things. But it didn't. But it didn't really pan out in the end because you can only really kill them once.
They do seem to imply that, because on the graphics they show their eyes glow blue. So, you know, there's kind of this whole wraith thing going on for them. But I'm remembering the passage you're talking about now, and they don't say the soul goes into them. They say their corpse is taken back to the vats to feed the body of their successor, so they just become compost.
Oh, right, okay.
It's not a soul transference thing.
Okay, I thought it was like a power increase for the next one.
Well, I mean, they're kind of hinting that means that, like, well, they're outright implying that they use the body of this one orc, and that'll make the next generation of orcs more powerful. But that's never said anywhere else. That's never been true anywhere else.
Okay, right.
So the only way it could really work is on a really brutal level, which it says, you know, if they don't take the body back, then the remaining ones are liquefied, and they just start all over again with a new batch, which would actually be pretty cool, because then it's saying, okay, so these are orcs who aren't just living by the normal, we need to murder all the other people at our station to rise up thing, because they've actually got their own separate fighting ethic, which encourages this specific brand of ruthless power. That's actually pretty cool, but, you know, the whole compost thing, yeah. The hell were we talking about? Yeah, no, when I got to that fight, the first one smacked me in the head with his bleeding thing, so I had to run away and find herbs for a bit. And by the time I got back, my captains had murdered the other 4, and I just walked up in time to see the big guy with his invincible shield facing off against them. Walked up to him on the off chance, figured, okay, I'll try stealth killing him. Weak to stealth. I just stabbed him in the back of the neck.
Oh, right.
It was actually a pretty badass moment, but I was kind of thinking... Okay, so in many ways, this should have been the final boss fight, and I didn't get anything. I literally spent the entire time trying to find herbs that were inside the map radius, so that was not ideal. What would have been cool was if you'd have got to the boss fight with Black Hand, and they hadn't dressed him up as Sauron, because that's just something someone's put that in the GDD at some point as a box-ticking measure to make it look cool, and then they've had no idea how they're supposed to do it. They should have just given you the Black Hand, maybe given him some kind of slight glowy visual aesthetic, show that he's been powered up by Celebrimbor or Sauron or something somehow, but made him capable of taking on a fully powered Talion, Talion and full 5 captains. Make him that incredibly hard. Hell, put 5 of them in if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
But they should have thought through a final boss battle. It does feel like the second half of the game, as we were talking about earlier, they had elements in there that were designed very early on, and potentially even produced very early on, which they couldn't get rid of because it would have been a significant expenditure of assets and or fundamentally altering the GDD, but which didn't really fit the tone of the game. Torvin was in exactly the wrong place. Though I grant you, if they'd have moved him earlier on in the game, it would have messed with the pacing and tone quite a bit, but then they would have had to cut him, so... You know, yeah, Torvin was dodgy. The hand was dodgy. The tower, I mean, you described him as a stealth boss battle.
Well, he was, really.
How? He only had slightly better than normal senses. You could literally ledge kill the guy, and I did numerous times. Because
he's a stealth boss battle. I'm not saying that he's a tough stealth boss battle. I'm saying that you have to use stealth to kill him. You can't straight up fight him. So in that way, he is a stealth boss battle. The quality of the battle is up for opinion, but how it plays out, you can't play it out any other way.
My dispute would be counting him as a boss battle, because he's kind of not. He's a battle, and he's a battle involving stealth, but I refuse to acknowledge that as a boss fight.
Yeah, I didn't really really enjoy it myself either, but I'd still definitely say it was a boss fight. Even if, like, I think you could possibly make it better even if you're trying to infiltrate the fortress, but there were still orcs there. So not only are you trying to sort of outwit him, but his army as well. Because with the way the stealth works in the game, it's very forgiving. So you could either make it very frustrating or just add in a few other things so that you're not just running rings around him.
I would have liked it if they'd have given him a ranged attack and Caragor senses. So if he saw you very quickly, so you had to tackle him from far away, but it still had to be stealth,
yeah,
that would mean that you'd be in situations where, like, trying to lure him to a position where you can attack him from a tower, but needing to be on the ground to do it. It felt like they put a lot of effort into the character design and then didn't really do much with him. And as Black Numenorians go, he was kind of incredibly shit, really.
I also never got the feeling that he was... It's weird because the hammer, you can definitely see that he's straight up like big meaty guy who solves things with his hammer. But the tower, I never got the impression that he was meant to be... I never got the impression that he was built up to be like master of deceit or lies or whatever. Because that's the role that the Black Hand filled.
Totally. Yeah, no, he's malice, I think he's supposed to be.
I don't know.
But then he's not really that malicious. He's just kind of there.
Yeah,
isn't
he seemed to me that he was somewhere between like the Black Hand was the, I don't know, the stealthy, deceitful one, and then the hammer was the just go for a fight one, and then the tower seemed somewhere in between. It seemed like I thought that he would be the final boss.
Yeah, I mean the Black Hand as well. They described him as Sauron's deceit. But when does he ever actually lie to anyone at any point during the game?
No, I don't know. You don't really interact with him at all, aside from that.
Exactly. I suppose this feeds into what you were saying, that there isn't really a story as such, just a series of action missions, which do advance the story, but they're not tied to it necessarily. God, we've been going all over the place.
That's fine.
Let's see, what other notes do I have here? So, bold things I liked about the narrative. Not having Mordor a blasted wasteland at the start.
Yeah, that was good.
That was pretty decent. The Sea of Nern in particular. That's always been a thing, but never really been portrayed. So it was a sort of bold, cool move for someone to say, actually, there are a lot more scarier places in Mordor, but this one is underrepresented and somewhat more visually interesting than just ash-blasted mountains all the time. I thought that was pretty decent.
Yeah, I'm glad they went with I wouldn't say a large mix of environments, but certainly more vibrant environments than just wallowing in the mud all the time.
Totally. I thought, as well, having the final mission take place just as Mount Doom was erupting.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
That was really cool.
I like that.
I liked it.
Yeah, sorry, from the term of the year there, I thought you meant that you didn't.
No, I enjoyed it.
I mean, that was something, again, they've clearly set that fairly early in development.
Yeah.
Someone said, oh, well, you know, if we're going to have this before just as Sauron's coming back to Mordor and before the whole area is all ash blasted, we can have Mount Doom erupt in the game. That was really badass. But...
And it leads significance to your actions as well. The actual overarching plot of the
it showed
of the whole series.
I did have a few points on that, actually. Where is the thing? I think this is entered into my rant on how wrong you are about Saruman. It's in here somewhere.
Oh, that Saruman moment. The Gollum one I cringed at first, and then I kind of liked it in the end. The Saruman one was like, okay, that was one scene and we're never going to hear from him again. Brilliant. What was the point?
I actually quite liked it. I thought it made sense in universe, potentially, and it shows Saruman at quite an interesting stage. We get him at the point where he's just starting his fall into corruption, but he hasn't actually fallen yet, which is really, really kind of cool, because by the time you see him, whenever you see him in The Hobbit, he doesn't appear in the books, does he? But when you see him in the films, he is still a good guy.
Yeah.
And when you see him in Lord of the Rings, at any point, he has already fallen, he just hasn't made it clear yet. This is the stage where he's trying to turn the enemy's weapons against them, but not for his own gain yet. And this is a huge theme in Lord of the Rings, is that taking the power of your enemy and using it for yourself, which feeds into the Celebrimbor conspiracy theory, by the way, taking the power of the enemy and using it for yourself is ultimately a corrupting factor that you should not sink to that level.
Yeah, you'll never win in that.
Oh, you might win, but you will become what you are trying to defeat. What's the thing? So, yes, it shows Saruman at an interesting point, and it is related to the books and the films, and he does appear elsewhere in the game. So how many of the artifacts did you get?
I didn't really go out of my way to get all the artifacts, but I had a few. Like, some of them did mention, like, there are other forces working in Mordor, which I thought kind of tied in. I think it could have been a bit more overt. Like, you might see some possessed orcs running around that weren't yours.
Well, except Saruman's possession is a lot more subtle, it's a lot less powerful powerful than the possession that you're capable of. And as well, there's this whole thing where potentially the possession that Celebrimbor is capable of, he's only capable of because of his contribution to the creation of the ring. So in theory, no one else should be able to do that.
No, fair enough.
But at any rate, there are a few things. I think maybe 5 or 6 of the artifacts in total. For starters, there's 3 coded letters.
Yeah, I actually had one of. I picked up my first one of those just before we started recording this.
Okay, so those tell the story of Saruman spying on Sauron's return to Mordor. There's also this whole interesting little sort of tie-in back to the narrative. So Sauron is arriving back in Mordor. Saruman is spying on Mordor in case of just such an event. So he's doing that in a couple of ways. He's got a couple of orcs working for him, and he has crows and potentially other birds also working for him, keeping track of things, spying on people. Sauron, as he arrives, he breeds or releases or something, introduces those little evil lizard bird things into the area, which are killing off all the crows, which is in their appendix entry, because the crows may be being used as spies, and it's pretty well established in the Lord of the Rings films that Saruman can use the crows as spies.
Yeah.
Additionally, you have the whole thing after that, where the crows are gone, the orcs are back in, but this one orc is still spying for Saruman, and he's doing it via the occasional crow, and this orc's saying, well, stop sending them, they're getting suspicious. So Sauron's wipes out the spies in Mordor, but he doesn't have total surveillance of the whole country yet, so he makes an alliance with these flies in Mordor as his response to the crows. So the flies start following that orc, and they eventually drive him insane. But because the flies are now his servants, the spiders, which are roaming all over the land, which are Shelob's children, are effectively enemies. Before that, they'd always been sort of allies of convenience, and on sort of the same-ish side of the alignment spectrum. But because the flies are now his servants, he can't have Shelob killing them, and Shelob's children killing them, so they declare war on the giant spiders and force them back into the mountains, which is where we then find Shelob in Lord of the Rings, which is a really, actually pretty cool thing, because it shows 1, Saruman doing his job, 2, Saruman's fall, 3, Shelob actually living up to her name as the last daughter of Ungoliant, but also being forced back by the rising power of Sauron. We see that Mordor is a living place before he gets there, and that his arrival isn't unopposed, no matter how blind the rangers on the gate may be, and that there are actual actions and politics and intrigues behind the scenes, which is actually really, really cool. This is one of the reasons why I quite like a lot of the world building, is there are things like that that feed back into, if not exactly the original material, then what you might imagine the original material to have discussed.
See, now I wish I'd spent a bit more time getting the artifacts.
Well, this is the thing. Christ, I'm trying to remember it as well, but I just got the last of the Ithilien things, and Celebrimbor has... bugger, what is it? He says something really, really quite damning along those using the enemy's own power against them lines. Christ, no, I don't remember it at all, I'm afraid. But I think there is this argument to be made that Celebrimbor has, if not designs on Middle-earth himself, then this desire to destroy Sauron in the same way that Saruman has, and that he's not necessarily acting out of benevolence so much as a need to, what's the right word, not dominate, not destroy, but... It's damning that he's a wraith, basically. It's damning that he's a wraith.
Right.
He is not a content spirit. He should not be... I mean, he's not a ring wraith, but he's not one of the sort of Barrow-Wight style things that you see in the Fellowship. Well, in the book, not the film. As far as I recall, you don't get to be a ghost in Tolkien's world unless you're very, very unhappy with something or cursed. And as far as we're led to believe, Sauron didn't curse him. Sauron kills him out of anger. Quite violently as well. That whole scene. I mean, I'd spent all game shanking...
Oh, with his own hammer as well.
Yeah, and that was not... like, that took a while.
I mean, it wasn't a heavy hammer. It was like a...
Well, it's mithril, isn't it?
Yeah, it did take a while.
Yeah. That was just... I mean, like, he smashes him up and then finally picks his brain in. That was Jesus. And I would like to say, whilst we're on the subject of the flashbacks, now, when I initially saw Celebrimbor attacking with that army, first of all, I was pissed off, because, like, the fuck, how is he possessing these guys back then? And then I was like, oh, shit, that's what he's using the ring for. That actually makes quite a lot of sense. And also means that all the descriptions for the legend of the swords and daggers, and the legend of the sword, the dagger, and the bow, tie in, because they're not... Otherwise, at what point would Celebrimbor have been able to fight? So those, presumably, I haven't looked at them in detail, but presumably tell the story of his escape and escapades in Mordor, as well as his uprising against Sauron, using Sauron's own orcs.
Yeah, I imagine they are. Some of those challenges are fantastic, by the way. Like I said, I didn't go for much of the artifacts, but I did do a lot of the weapon challenges, and they're fantastic.
I haven't done so many of them, so would you care to speak on them for a little bit? Though I will get back to that ring point.
Obviously, they don't really offer anything story-wise, aside from, like, these are supposedly Celebrimbor's weapons.
Yeah, where the hell did that that come from?
As far as we know, there could be someone else's or just various agents throughout Mordor. But I'm going to take a guess and say that they're Celebrimbor's weapons. But yeah, they just sort of take the mechanics of the game and try and push you into different situations to try and use them as best you can. There's one that I played earlier today where you're in a fortress and you're trying to stop the alarm being raised, but you have to do it in combat. So it's not a case of you just stealthing your way out of it. You have to be in the middle of a fortress fight while also stopping the alarm being raised, which is really tough, actually.
Sounds pretty funky. Now, the thing that kept me off was the intermittent freezing, because it's a checkpoint system. Quite a good checkpoint system, but a checkpoint system nonetheless. I wasn't really able to stick with a lot of those missions. I really couldn't do more than one in a row at most. And if it especially when it freezes up just as you're about to complete it, it really does put you off playing the game for a while.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'd get annoyed with it if my game were freezing while I was trying to do them. But generally they're quite short, and you can just sort of, if you're feeling bored and you want to test yourself, because the combat, I was really disappointed because the game starts off and the combat feels tough but fair. It feels like it can very quickly. It's got I know you haven't played them, but the Dark Souls games. That sort of feeling where things can go from you feeling quite confident and feeling like things are almost too easy to everything has gone to shit within seconds.
But usually when it's gone to shit, it's your fault.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or it's random happenstance that doesn't feel like it was brought in to smite you. It's like, oh Christ, the thing that always happens to me is you plan an attack on a facility, you find out that there are 3 captains just hanging out eating lunch there, and you're like, oh shit, this whole thing. I would keep finding that, the captains, especially the minor captains, can just be any random orc. So if you don't keep an eye on who you're shanking from behind, you'll go up and try to...
You do have to scout out things, and they do move around as well, so even if a fight takes a while, then they can patrol into the area.
Well, I mean, I told you about that fight I had with one of the war chiefs, didn't I? Where there were 3 other bosses in the fortress with him. He had 2 bodyguards, who I killed one by one, but I took so long fighting him and the surviving bodyguard that the one who died first turned up, and then by the time I'd killed him again, the other one had also turned up, and I had 2 other guys... No, not 2 other guys. One other guy patrolled into the area after I'd kited them away from the fortress. Oh, Jesus. I mean, it was a really awesome, tense fight, especially with the, oh god, my computer's gonna melt at any moment thing going on. The fact that it didn't, that was one of my favourite bits in the game, was thinking, I've been fighting for over an in-game day here, and it's just not letting up.
I really enjoyed it though, especially because I know people think that it can be a bit annoying with, whenever you enter a fight with a captain, they do this little clashing swords thing.
I like it.
And then they have a little bark. I like it, especially if you're in a tense battle. Because then it can very quickly go from, oh, I'm just going to fight a load of orcs. Oh shit, it's you.
That one. God, you know what it reminds me of, actually, is, that the beginning of Portal 2, where GLaDOS powers up for the first time, and it's just that, oh, shit, at just the right moment of, oh, God, this is the worst possible time for you to wake up / arrive. No, I agree, and the fact that they have a lot of barks, the barks are personalised, done well, and voiced well as well.
Have you seen some of the, I don't know how much audio is in this game, because
it's got to be obscene, but the scriptwriter deserves a medal of some description. Hey.
But how they treat enemies in the game is nothing short of brilliant, just characterizing them. But some of the things that the orcs say before they die, it could be a mix of oh, I'll see you in hell or whatever. But then occasionally you get these really weird ones, or really sort of existential ones.
Oh god, yeah. Did you ever have any of the okay, there's no other way to say it, but the really camp orcs?
No, I don't think I did.
I have never felt so enjoyably, creepily violated by something in a game. Yeah, I don't know quite how to describe. Well, play around a bit. I think anything with the nickname The Poet is a good one. My favourite one was what was his name? It was something like Ugruk the Giggles.
Ugruk the Giggles.
I know, right?
I had a bunch of mad ones. I didn't have any camp ones, but that sounds fantastic.
The wise ones are fun as well, and these ones with the little personality traits, they're not rare.
I had one that was the Poet.
Yeah,
and he'd rhyme at me.
Oh, he actually rhymed.
Everything he said was a rhyme.
Fucking awesome, and as well, very Tolkien-y. The fact that the orcs sing at various points, they do it a lot less in the second map.
Oh, it was
But
beautiful.
singing is a huge thing in Lord of the Rings. You're supposed to sing. Even the orcs are supposed to sing. It was great. I would love for there to be more singing orcs in that game. Sorry, yeah. So the fact that the captains, the lower ranked captains, can be anywhere. When you go up and you try to free a bunch of slaves by shanking someone in the back, they turn around, grab your knife, and deck you in the face because they're invulnerable to stealth. It's not such a threat late game, but early game when you didn't realize that could happen, and it's just oh god, you're not a regular mook, are you?
Yeah, I mean, I had one that I decapitated him, but before I cut his head off, he said like something like, "I had so many dreams. Please remember my name."
Aww.
And it's like, whoa, what the?
It's really.
And he was like this big, ugly, like angry-looking orc, and you just think, oh god, okay.
It's
Feel a bit sorry.
which is clearly just what they want you to do, but the fact that it doesn't come across as cheesy is amazing. All the orcs with individual personalities, they actually feel like, because obviously they all have individual personalities, all the captains, but they mostly have generic orc ones. There are variations within there, and they're very good, but
Yeah.
they set a clear standard. So when you do get one who is slightly different, they still play vaguely to the orc stereotypes.
Yeah, it's not like they're all like waxing lyrical about the nature of the world. They are still orcs, but then you occasionally get one in 10 or 20 or odd,
Yeah.
who makes you remember him.
I mean, I kept getting the ones that really annoyed me were the ones who don't talk, who just sort of do little giggles and mostly just click their tongue.
Yeah, I had a few of those.
I actually had my nemesis.
Did you ever any plague orcs?
Yeah, I mostly just shanked them up though. I figured, we don't need. The hell is our equivalent of FEMA? I don't know whoever deals with, plague and shit over here. We don't need them poking their heads around. No, I did just mostly kill them. No, I was gonna say, on that guy, so he never spoke, not a once, the one really annoying one, until the final mission when, as I said earlier, he came up for as my nemesis, and then he shrieks out and has this really deep, booming voice. It was like, oh wow, he actually spoke, and they saved that for this last bit, so he could be speaking this entire time, which in so many ways made him so much more psychotic and played to the trope.
Yeah. See, this is why I think the Nemesis system is the best part of the game, because even with great world building, a lot of games have great world building. I can't think of another game that does just not even like bosses and things, but just sort of mooks and sub bosses and treats them in this way, like a real proper hierarchy where it's not just where it's the individual enemies can work their way up to become your nemesis, but it's characterizing every enemy, not just the one or two bosses.
Well, I mean, technically speaking, Dwarf Fortress.
Well, yeah, I suppose, but okay, like mainstream game.
And as well, frankly, I probably deserve to be crucified for this, but Dwarf Fortress doesn't do it as well. Dwarf Fortress tracks more, and it tracks more on an individual basis, but it doesn't actually, at the moment, do much with a lot of that. When an orc in Shadow of Mordor is slightly perverted, you know they're slightly perverted. It affects the way they behave, it affects the way they attack, and the way they command their troops. In Dwarf Fortress, you only know that by looking at their profile screen. It's there, and it does affect their actions on, in many ways, a more complex level, but it doesn't feel like it affects actions very much. And even then, it's only there if you really look for it. It's nowhere near as accessible.
It's show versus tell, really. I mean, you can like, because you're not you can create these very in-depth characters with very complex personalities, but you're probably in a game like this, you're only going to be interacting with them for minutes at a time, if that. So you need to get things to show these one or two aspects of their personality very quickly.
It's almost like Creatures, but with swords, which is a compliment, I think, because that game was hilarious.
I never played it.
Really? Okay, so Creatures was, I think, 3 games in the end? Yeah, 3 games and a couple of those major expansion packs that pretend not to be sequels but are. And it was made by a guy, I forget his name, but he's doing another sort of interesting thing that isn't Creatures because he doesn't own the copyright anymore. But the basic premise is AI that actually attempt to replicate brains and brain chemicals, but it was kind of billed as a bit of a kid's game. So it's in this bizarre situation where the creatures themselves are capable of learning in a very, very complex way and have a lot of different individual hormones and chemicals and whatnot bounding around in their brains. Very specific individual genetics with not that many sprites. But it's presented as though it's for kids. But a lot of the humor and fun in it came from, as a child, playing around with crossbreeding the different things, having family trees. I personally injected hepatitis. So hepatitis was one of the few things in the... You could inject any chemical that was in the game, which was one of, I think, almost 1,000, into your creatures. But hepatitis was one of the few ones I actually recognized. So I would often give the creatures the different forms of of hepatitis just to see how the plague would spread, and it would spread in a realistic, naturalistic fashion, often through families, unfortunately.
Oh, that sounds.
Yeah, they're the ones who hang out.
That sounds
together.
very interesting.
Oh god, yeah, it's a very interesting game, and you can get it off Good Old Games, so it's definitely worth picking up if you ever see it, on sale or not, frankly. But it does have sort of unfortunate Nazi overtones. I would be highly surprised if the majority of kids who actually played around with that chemical maker didn't do the same as I did, and systematically just inject individual creatures with every chemical they found just to see what the effect was, which in some situations does nothing, in some situations gives them sort of fatal brain, well, not fatal brain tumors, but fatal brain overdoses of different things, you know, or you bliss them out so much they forget to eat, or you make them so angry they beat their kids to death or something. God, it was a really dark game, now I come to think about it. Oh, kind of want to play creatures. Anyway, so it's kind of like this, but with swords. No, it's kind of like that with swords, rather.
Yeah.
I think. I'm kind of losing what the connection was there.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that it's got that strong characterization element to it.
Yeah.
But also that you're playing around with that. How successful were you in deliberately altering captains' personalities? Now, I, for instance, found it very hard, partially because I quite like getting the killing shot, but I found it very hard to keep captains going rather than just execute everything en masse, everyone en masse, but also very hard to have captains survive encounters with me. They're often killed whilst running away, even before the land became Caragor infested, and rarely did I find, say, that a captain would develop a fear to burns because I'd set him on fire, mostly because once they were set on fire, they just died. Were you actually able to influence the minds of your captains very much, or what?
I spent far too long toying with it. I was playing politics with my orcs. Now, because you were telling me about your difficulty because you kept killing your captains, that they developed these really invincible captains going on.
Oh god, yes.
With mine, I manufactured a variety of captains that would have like one or two very deep weaknesses. And then later on in the game, I made my branded war chiefs as invincible as I could, and made sure that I'd only pick the war chiefs with the fewest fears and the fewest weaknesses, and then I'd raise them up to the level of war chiefs. So I played around with the system so much. But I mean, you can sort of develop their fears. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Like I had one war chief who was afraid of betrayal because several times he was extremely tough, but several times I'd make his bodyguards betray him, and he'd survived about 3 or 4 of these encounters, but he developed a fear of betrayal. So it just became a case of me having to brand one of his captains, brand one of his bodyguards, set him off, and then he'd run away out of the fortress. And that was the way I eventually killed him.
They can actually develop a fear of you?
Yeah, I've had a few of them. They can get enraged by the sight of you.
Really?
That was terrifying.
I can imagine, especially on something with regen. I mean, frankly, rage without regen isn't that much of an issue. It's annoying, but unless the war boss is really threatening, a little bit of extra damage, if you're doing damage to them, either you're doing it remotely or you're doing it in such a way that they're not going to get the chance to strike back. But when they've got regen on, Jesus Christ. I actually found it a lot less in the second area than in the first, which made me quite glad. In some ways, I felt a little bit cheaped out in others, because fights are a lot less challenging when you can just smash them to the floor and then shank them repeatedly. Right, as I was saying some time ago, the ring in that flashback sequence.
Oh god, what were you talking about there?
So, about me getting annoyed when I saw Celebrimbor beating Sauron down.
Right.
And then it's like, Jesus Christ, what the hell is this? This is Sauron, he's almost at the height of his power, and you're just smashing him into the ground. What the hell is wrong with you? Why would I believe this? And then, fantastically,
the ring flies off.
Yeah, and it's a genuine moment of badassery for the ring and for Sauron. And he goes straight from that right back up to, well, you are in trouble, my friend. And smashes him down. It's fantastic. Redeemed the whole cutscene for me. Because, yeah, Celebrimbor was badass, but it's like, this is Sauron. He's supposed to be one of the most kick-ass entities in the world, in all of fantasy literature. And then that instant, just the ring slipping off his finger. Because as well, it kind of shows the ring in one more of those situations where it's ever vigilant for a chance to betray its owner. It does the whole Isildur thing. It's really, really, really cool. I really liked it. And that is my point.
Okay. Did I mention about the difficulty? Like in the beginning, it feels like a very satisfying difficulty, and then as you level up your skills, it becomes very easy towards the end of the game.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we talked about it, but then we never really got anywhere with it. We started rambling about the Nemesis system again, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's very little. I mean, once you've got the maximum health thing and 5 hit streak execution, you're basically not screwed in any combat situation that doesn't involve poison or a Uruks, especially Uruk Berserkers, in a situation where they've got a captain who enables simultaneous attacking.
Yeah, I mean, it seems definitely from things that I've read that they planned on having one or two more enemy types that they did, because they don't introduce any more enemy types in the second area, at least not orc enemy types. And it seems like there's a real gap of Caragor riders, for one thing.
Yeah, everyone's always talking about it, and no one ever actually does it.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, I wish I could ride a Caragor. Oh, I've seen people ride Caragors, and then it never happens. It can get a bit overwhelming in the first area because they keep throwing these new different orcs at you, which contributes to the difficulty because you're steadily trying to juggle more and more types of orcs, and then it kind of drops off, and you easily know when to exploit what orcs' weaknesses and how to deal with different types of them. So I think just one or two more enemy types could have made the difficulty just right.
Even souped up versions of the existing ones, a defender whose shield wouldn't break, or well, maybe that would be a bad idea, or a berserker who has much more rapid attacks. You know, something.
The berserkers in that, I wish they were more like the Two Towers berserkers.
Yeah, but they're Uruks, not Urukai.
I know, but I like the giant sword and the pretty much naked ones. They were so badass, but not because they were naked.
Love me some oiled up,
but
red, naked, mutilated guy, like some kind of Hammer House of Horror version of Mr. Hines.
I think otherwise
Trying to think of another source thing.
Other than the difficulty, though, I think the combat was very satisfying.
Yes.
It was very Batman inspired.
If there was more, I couldn't comment, I didn't actually play it. Assassin's Creed as well, I've been told, but I only ever really played the first one.
It's a lot less forgiving than Assassin's Creed.
Well, that's quite good. I think it could do with being, if not exactly harder, then less forgiving, or some way to give you more to risk.
I think just ways that it will break up your pattern, because once you get into a good kill streak, then you're basically unstoppable.
Yeah.
So just new ways to break up the pattern would be brilliant.
Could we brainstorm some ideas, maybe? What would we have liked to have seen? Something to make clumps more threatening on a more regular basis. So there is the captain's thing, but that only shows up quite rarely, and it usually makes the captains in question a priority target. I hesitate to say some kind of grenade, because I don't think that would have fitted in with the game.
Possibly some way of stunning you or pinning you in place, because at least I depend a lot on movement and momentum when I'm fighting, and I think that's kind of built into the combat system, that if you're always moving, then you're really invincible. So something that will just pin you in place, even like an archer that has your ability to pin their
to stunlock a leg.
Or just pin them to the ground with an arrow. But to do that on you, that would break up the flow a bit. I don't know. I think it would just come down to more enemy types. The combat system they had was very versatile. It was just the fact that it was too overpowered towards the end of the game.
Well, not even towards the end of the game, once you've got most of the medium skill unlocks.
Well, I suppose.
Which for me was about a third of the way in, because I was having those troubles with the main missions, so I got around doing just captain hunting and getting the collectibles and things. So I had maximum power very early, and I had a lot of the sort of best skills very early. And as I say, once you've got the 5-hit kill streak, you are very hard pressed to be actually hard pressed, and especially once you've got that and max health.
And can you get triple executions?
No, you can. It's double executions, but it's not just double executions.
Yeah, once you get double executions, that was the absolute tipping point for me, where I was like, oh, I'm not getting any damage at all.
Yeah, I think orcs should really be more. There should be more archers, and they should be more willing to fire into melee.
Yeah,
would be nice. Or if, some kind of pinning power, I suppose, as you say. Maybe something if there's sort of a few orcs, if they could bum rush you, would be nice. Just not all of the group attack at once, but 3 or 4 are capable of doing an animation where they pin you in place, or too many attack for you to counter.
Or a New Game Plus mode.
New Game Plus would also be pretty welcome.
That game could really do with a New Game Plus mode. Or, and here's something,
I can't imagine that it won't be introduced.
Well, we'll see. Lieutenants. Although that may be stretching the...
Lieutenants,
sorry.
That's one of my issues with Torvin, was if you're going to go to the lengths of giving him a Scottish accent, you do not have him say lieutenant. It's lieutenant.
Alright. That may be stretching the Nemesis system a bit too far, but having lieutenants as well, sort of a mini bodyguard system for existing captains would be good to introduce in a New Game Plus mode. They're not captains in themselves, but they do have their own traits.
Or if the bodyguard system just trickled down would be nice. I mean, as it was pretty confusing, because as far as I could tell, it went captains, then veteran captains, then captains again, with war chiefs at the top.
Yeah, sometimes the war chiefs would have bodyguards from just anywhere in the hierarchy.
Yeah, but it's a good system, and could use... It would be nice if it could have some development. Let's see, what else have I got in here? So we've done most of the stuff talking about combat, we've done a lot of the stuff talking about the Nemesis system. Boss fights, Hammer of Sauron. I personally, using my own words, would describe him as predictable and straightforward, but otherwise satisfying. First proper boss after defeating the war chiefs.
I thought he was satisfying. Yeah, as a proper first boss, he was, he was not exactly difficult because you don't really want that out of a first boss. He was a challenge. He mixed things up a bit, and he was just,
yeah.
I don't know. He was tough, but not overwhelming.
Yeah, he's initially threatening, but once you realise that you can cope with him if you make the effort, and that he won't stand up insanely to consistent fire. So the fact that you can beat him just through skill, you don't just need to kite him forever.
Yeah.
That was quite nice. That was quite welcome. On the subject of boss fights, the White Graug.
I quite like the White Graug fight. I wish that the oh god, what are they called? The ghouls attacked you as much as they attacked him, because it felt like a good, like a three-way boss fight between like your, I don't know what I put in the notes, your speed, the Graug's sort of strength and ferocity, and then the ghouls just sheer numbers. But if the ghouls attacked you, I think it would have been a good way to mix that up a bit.
The spitters will aggro onto you sometimes, but their first priority is the Graug. Now, my comment here would be is that I don't think those ghouls are there to fight you. If they'd have put a matriarch or two in, then they would be more of a genuine threat to you, because there would be pressure to kill the matriarch before the Graug de-aggros and attacks you. What the ghouls are currently there for is to, and we should probably address all the additional wildlife at some point, what the ghouls are currently there for is to give the Graug a way to regen health.
Oh yeah.
My issue being that I think he should have regened a little bit more health. So that's why they attack him rather than you. Because if they attacked you, they would be at you would be at a distinct advantage. As is, the best way to stop them isn't to shoot them out of the Graug's hand, but to wander up to him whilst he's smashing them apart, whilst he's trying to eat them rather, and slaughter them at the base before he can smash you. So it's less a three-way fight and more that they're a resource for him. But they don't give him quite enough health for it to be
I'd like it to be a bit of both, really. I liked it their aggression to mix evenly between you and the Graug.
Well, you see, as I say, I think it would be cool if they kept the system as was, but perhaps put in a few more spitters that do aggro onto you, so that it's sort of equally divided. The ones closest to you attack you, the ones closest to the Graug attack the Graug, and put in a matriarch or two.
Yeah.
So that you're having to actually fight these matriarchs which do pose a danger to you, and which you can't have running around at the same time as him, whilst the Graug is regenning health. And that actually would have been a pretty cool mechanic as well, because even if you tried to attack the ghouls whilst they're attacking the Graug, then you have the danger of the matriarchs coming up from behind and pinning you in place, whilst the one-hit wonder can smash you up.
Yeah.
But overall, I thought he was quite nice. Tackled him sort of almost immediately before the tower, and he gave me a lot of false hope for the balancing of the boss fights to come. I thought the addition of the ghouls added a nice element to him, that without them he would have just been sort of knock him down very easy, but also very boring. As was, he wasn't at all hard. In fact, yeah, he was still pretty easy, but the fact that the ghouls are there meant that he wasn't just press X to win, but with a couple of extra steps in between. I think he could have got a little bit more health off them, but still.
I mean, it was just really what you want from a boss fight, just a combination of mechanics, which is the same with the hammer as well. You used a lot of the abilities that you'd acquired beforehand, and the same with the Graug. You used the abilities you get from Torvin, or earlier on in the game, but brought up again with Torvin.
You used the abilities that you really should have got with Torvin, but actually already knew.
Bloody Caragor. I didn't want 2 missions on Caragor riding. I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah, and when he just hopped on and the Caragor immediately calmed down, it's like, that really pissed me off. You've actually done pretty well with the Caragors so far. I felt they were a decent addition to Mordor. They do help keep across this idea that the wildlife is feral, and that it's dangerous here in general, and it's not entirely a realm subservient to Sauron. Not yet, at least. But then when he just hops on a new, even more hardcore Caragor at that, and he's just there, it's like, Talion doesn't count. He's cheating. He's dominating the minds of these beasts, potentially using an artifact of immense power or some nebulous Wi-Fi connection to such. You just hopped on, and it started doing what you wanted. That really did. Yeah. It was one more thing about him where it's just like, why? Why are you doing this? This is not necessary.
Also, I wanted more Wandering Graugs.
Yes.
There were hardly any. And also, on top of that, Graug riding was shit.
Yes. I mean, because they delayed it for so long.
God, it's so slow.
And you do so little damage.
And most of his attacks are still based on attacking one orc at a time. He doesn't really have many big sweeping attacks, so there's no real benefit to riding one.
And you take so much damage as well. The only reason I could see to have one would be so that you could ride it into a giant imposing fortress and let it loose to cause havoc, which is what you already did with them. Like beforehand, I don't know about you, but I would occasionally kite the Graug that spawns runs just north of the major spawning tower in map 1, up to the Black Gate or down to Caragor Towers.
Caragor Towers.
And just let him... Okay, yeah, so for the listeners, for the listener undoubtedly listening from his secret prison cell where we keep him, Caragor Towers is the name for the southern bit of the map, which has, I think, about 3 or 4 Caragors, which are sort of giant, eviler versions of wargs, not quite, but basically, kept in cages. And then another 3 of these meat slabs, which when you shoot, spawn an additional 2 or 3 Caragors. So no matter how many orcs there are in that base, if you release all the Caragors and then spawn more, you will end up with a roving pack of them, capable of moving anywhere on the platforms, taking down anything. It actually makes for a really interesting task when you're trying to assassinate a captain who is holed up in one bit of the base, who can't get out, but you can't get in because there's 12 of these fuckers riding around. I mean, I got chased out of there by 8 of them once, and it was terrifying. Because Caragors will automatically stop to attack orcs rather than you, so if you're being chased by one, you can just lead it through a pack of orcs and keep running, and by the time it's done with the orcs, you'll be long gone. But if there's 8 of them, you have to run past several packs of orcs, with the Caragors slowly gaining on you all the time. Yeah, no, that was fun. Yeah, no, you can kite a Graug into somewhere, and with the riding, it's, you know, I guess a bit more direct, but they hold that ability out for the first 2/3 of the game, and it's just sitting there. And then you don't even use it in a main mission, it's a side thing. I would almost have preferred if they'd have left it out and kept the Graugs as big, really hard to kill creatures. I also thought the ankle thing was unnecessary, especially since we didn't use it on the boss fight Graug. So all it did was give a weakness to this major creature that beforehand was one of the few things in the landscape where I was like, right, if I see one of those, I know I probably can beat it, but I can't just casually waltz into one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really try to fight any of the Graugs until we had the Torvin missions.
Really? Now, I got quite close to killing one...
Because there were so few of them around, to be honest. I forgot that they were an element at points.
But there's the major spawning tower in the first map, a Graug spawned, for me, just north of that, in the rock, just next to the rock, just north of that, about 1/3 of the time. As long as it was daylight.
Yeah, I mean, I'd see their icons on the minimap, and I just go around them.
Did you not just have the desire to kill it though? I mean, knowing that it's there and that it's tough to kill.
Not really. I sort of, because I saw it as a kind of I saw it as a kind of, nobody has referenced this at the moment in tutorials. I was really bad with this. Nobody has referenced this at any point in tutorial, so I'm just going to assume that you can't kill them.
Really?
Yeah.
Callum.
I assumed that at some point they were going to introduce a method of killing them, which they did. But until that point, I was like, I'm not even going to bother.
Okay, so you didn't just assume it was immortal, you just assumed that it would be really annoying to kill. It's fair enough. I was going to say otherwise...
Well, I assumed it would be immortal.
Oh, you did assume it was going to be immortal?
Yeah, I assumed it would be...
What kind of a PMP player are you? You hear of something that may or may not be immortal, and you don't immediately take that as a challenge.
Well, you know.
I'm disgusted, frankly. What would Benji say? Not a lot, I tell you. Not a lot. Because he's lost his voice screaming at Final Fantasy.
He has. So do you want to talk about the rest of the wildlife? We talked about the Caragors and the Graugs. So the Ghoul...
And the Hellhawks, actually, as well.
Oh, God, they didn't
about.
Do anything.
To be fair, they're there as a background thing.
I know.
As I say, a background thing which does feed into the wider world. I actually quite like that. It would have been nicer if we'd have seen them preying on birds, or if the birds in the game...
Or even attack you. I wish they'd attack you.
I don't know, I could live with them not attacking Talion. It would be nice if we saw them feeding off corpses more.
Yeah.
And I think that goes for all of the avian creatures. Bats, the birds, I suppose the seagulls get an exception, but I did actually have, just before I came into this Skype thing, I was trying to play around with it, but it's freezing a lot on me now, and I saw for the first time ghouls out in the wild, not near a cave or anything, and they were eating an orc they had killed, which I was actually quite pleased with. It was like, oh, that's funky, I didn't realise the AI was as radiant as that, because the orcs themselves do wander around, they have tasks, they have jobs. My favourite one so far is when I just got out of the White Graug mission. I just came out into the sort of cave, the ravine you're in, and there was a pile of slaves on the floor in front of me, and I figured, okay, well, you know, dead guys, it's no big issue, but I'd so far seen slaves and orcs drop from the sky a fair few times, so I thought nothing of it. But as I'm walking towards them, I see another slave kick down in an arc towards this pile. As I look up, I see that there is in fact a big train of slaves up there, and the orcs are bringing them up to the cliff, and then kicking them off into this ravine, one by one.
Oh my God.
I know. No explanation. Now, to clarify, this does happen in the game. You see them do it beforehand, but it's usually one orc laughing at a single slave and then kicking them off the cliff. This was a systematic. There was a literal small pile of corpses at the bottom there.
Wow.
Yes. Oh.